The moment you read this, the illusion breaks. Not because the plan was clever or complex, but because every plan built on harm carries a hidden flaw. It depends on silence, fear, and the belief that people are powerless. The truth is simpler and stronger. Power does not come from control over others. It comes from clarity, courage, and the quiet refusal to participate in cruelty. That is why any plan rooted in wrongdoing collapses the instant it is examined with an awake mind. At first glance, bad intentions often wear the mask of intelligence. They look calculated. They sound confident. They promise gain without effort, dominance without accountability, victory without conscience. But look closer and you see the rot. Every harmful scheme assumes that people will freeze, that systems will fail, that voices will stay quiet. It assumes that fear is permanent. That assumption is the weakest link. Fear is loud at first, but it is not loyal. It does not stay where it is planted. It leaks. It cracks. It moves people to talk, to notice, to act. The human spirit has a way of resisting cages, even invisible ones. History proves this again and again. The darkest plans unravel not because they were exposed by genius, but because ordinary people refuse to look away. The collapse begins with awareness. Awareness is dangerous to evil because it shines light without asking permission. When someone understands that harm thrives on secrecy, they become less secretive themselves. They share. They question. They reach out. That single act, refusing to stay isolated, has ended more destructive intentions than force ever could. There is also a deeper reason these plans fail. They misunderstand human value. They treat people as objects, as leverage, as means to an end. But people are not static. They think. They adapt. They remember. You cannot reduce a living, breathing person to a variable and expect the equation to hold. Humanity is not a spreadsheet. It does not obey cold logic divorced from empathy. The very act of reading critically is resistance. When you pause and think, when you feel discomfort and ask why, you are already outside the trap. Harm relies on speed. It wants decisions made in panic, reactions made in shock. Slowing down is a form of defense. Clarity dismantles urgency. Questions dismantle lies. Consider how many destructive ideas survive only because no one challenges them aloud. The moment someone says, "This doesn't feel right," the spell weakens. The moment someone asks, "Who gets hurt by this?" the foundation cracks. The moment someone chooses compassion over convenience, the plan loses oxygen. There is also accountability, the quiet force that never sleeps. Harmful actions create ripples. Those ripples touch families, communities, consciences. Even when no one is watching, the weight accumulates. Guilt is not a myth. Consequences are not optional. Every plan that ignores this reality is already failing, it just doesn't know it yet. On the other side of fear is connection. Connection is the enemy of cruelty. When people are linked to each other, to support, to purpose, manipulation becomes harder. Isolation is the favorite tool of wrongdoing, but isolation is fragile. One conversation can shatter it. One message can reopen the world. This is why education matters. Not just facts, but wisdom. Teaching people how to think, how to trust their instincts, how to seek help without shame. A society that values mental strength, emotional literacy, and mutual care is not an easy target. Plans designed to exploit weakness find none where resilience is cultivated. There is a powerful truth many overlook: most people want to help. They want to protect. They want to do the right thing. Harmful plans assume indifference, but indifference is rarer than it appears. When given the chance, people step up. They speak. They intervene. They choose solidarity over silence. And then there is courage, not the loud, cinematic kind, but the steady kind. The courage to say no. The courage to walk away. The courage to report, to warn, to protect. Courage does not need to be perfect. It only needs to be present. One brave decision can undo months of malicious intent. The collapse also happens internally. A mind that plans harm must constantly justify itself. It must lie, rationalize, dehumanize. That mental strain grows. Cracks form. Mistakes happen. Meanwhile, a mind aligned with integrity grows calmer, clearer, stronger. In the long run, integrity outperforms deception every time. Read this again in a different way, not as a story about wrongdoing, but as a reminder of your own strength. You are not as vulnerable as fear suggests. You are not as alone as danger implies. Awareness, connection, and courage are not rare resources. They are everywhere, waiting to be activated. The most important realization is this: evil does not need to be defeated by becoming something else. It defeats itself by being exposed to truth. The moment light enters, the structure collapses. Not with drama, but with inevitability. So when you hear of plans that rely on harm, remember this. They are louder than they are strong. They are more desperate than they appear. They survive only in shadows, and shadows disappear when someone opens their eyes. Read. Think. Speak. Connect. Protect. These simple actions are more powerful than any scheme built on fear. The collapse always begins with awareness, and you've already taken the first step, and as the awareness deepens, something else becomes clear: strength multiplies when it is shared. No harmful plan survives contact with a united, conscious community. The idea that people will remain disconnected forever is a fantasy, and fantasies do not hold weight in the real world. Human beings are wired to reach out, to warn one another, to protect what matters. The moment connection forms, secrecy loses its grip. There is a quiet intelligence in intuition that many underestimate. That uneasy feeling, that inner pause that says something is wrong, is not weakness. It is an early warning system refined over generations. Plans built on harm depend on people ignoring that signal, brushing it aside, or being told they are overreacting. But when someone listens to their intuition and respects it, the entire structure starts to shake. Another flaw appears when you look at time. Harmful intentions are impatient. They want results quickly, before doubt sets in, before scrutiny arrives. But time favors truth. Time allows patterns to emerge, inconsistencies to surface, allies to gather. What seems powerful in a moment of chaos becomes fragile under sustained attention. Patience, often dismissed as passive, is actually an active force that exposes what cannot endure. There is also the underestimated power of storytelling. When people speak about danger, when experiences are shared instead of buried, others recognize the signs sooner. Language becomes a shield. Words travel farther than threats ever could. A single story can prevent countless repetitions of harm. Simply by making people more aware of what to watch for and what to avoid, control is another illusion that collapses quickly. No one can fully control another human being, no matter how elaborate the scheme. People resist in ways that are subtle and unpredictable. A glance, a delay, a remembered detail, a moment of defiance, these small acts add up. Harm relies on absolute obedience, but absolute obedience does not exist in living minds. What truly dismantles destructive plans is dignity. When people see themselves as worthy of safety, respect, and care, exploitation becomes harder. Dignity creates boundaries. Boundaries create resistance. Resistance creates collapse. Teaching someone their value is one of the most powerful forms of prevention there is. Even systems that seem intimidating are ultimately run by people, and people have consciences. Not all of them, not all the time, but enough. Enough to create leaks. Enough to ask questions. Enough to intervene when something crosses a line. Harmful plans assume systems are machines. They forget that machines are operated by humans, and humans are not empty. Hope plays a role too, though it is often misunderstood. Hope is not blind optimism. It is the belief that action matters. When someone believes their choice can make a difference, they act. And action disrupts harm faster than fear ever could. Hopelessness paralyzes, hope mobilizes. There is also the reality of memory. Harm leaves traces. Not just externally but internally. People remember faces, voices, places, moments. Those memories resurface. They connect. They point back to the truth. No plan that relies on being forgotten can survive in a world where memory persists. As you continue reading, notice how the fear loses its shape. What once felt overwhelming becomes smaller, more manageable. This is not accidental. Fear shrinks when examined. It grows only when avoided. Attention is not danger, attention is protection. Ultimately, the collapse is not dramatic. There is no single explosion, no cinematic ending. It is quieter than that. A missed step. A question asked too early. A warning delivered in time. A door that does not open. A voice that refuses to be silent. Piece by piece, the structure falls apart until nothing is left but the realization that it was never as strong as it pretended to be, and in that realization is empowerment. Not just the absence of danger, but the presence of confidence. Confidence that awareness works. Confidence that people care. Confidence that light is not something you wait for, it is something you bring with you. The more people understand this, the harder it becomes for harm to take root anywhere. And that understanding, once spread, cannot be undone. What follows is the quiet aftermath, the part no one dramatizes, yet it is the most important. When harmful intent dissolves, it leaves behind a lesson stronger than fear ever was. It teaches that vigilance is not paranoia, that awareness is not weakness, and that caring deeply is not a liability. It is armor. People often imagine safety as something granted by authority or enforced by walls. But real safety grows from consciousness. It grows when individuals notice patterns, trust their judgment, and look out for one another without being asked. Harm fails most often not because it is fought head-on, but because it finds no place to stand. There is a shift that happens when someone realizes this. They stop seeing themselves as a potential victim and start seeing themselves as a participant in protection. That shift changes posture, decisions, conversations. It turns passive existence into active presence. And presence is something danger cannot easily navigate. Another truth emerges: silence is heavier than speaking. Keeping quiet costs more in the long run than raising a concern ever will. Silence isolates. Speaking connects. And connection is the environment where safety thrives. Even a single sentence shared with the right person can redirect an entire outcome. Trust is rebuilt in small moments. A check-in message. A shared ride. A habit of informing someone where you are. These are not signs of fear, they are signs of wisdom. The strongest people do not rely on luck. They rely on systems of care they consciously build around themselves. What also becomes clear is that prevention is invisible by nature. You rarely see the danger that never happened. You only feel the calm afterward, the ordinary continuation of life. but that calm is earned. It is the result of countless choices made with intention, empathy, and foresight. Education plays a silent role here, not the kind found only in books, but the kind passed through experience and conversation. When people share what they've learned, others don't have to learn the hard way. Knowledge becomes a shared shield rather than a private burden. There is also humility in recognizing that no one is immune to risk, and strength in refusing to pretend otherwise. Awareness does not mean living in fear, it means living awake. An awake mind notices exits, notices people, notices changes in tone and timing. It stays flexible. It stays ready. Over time, this awareness becomes instinctive. It no longer feels like effort. It feels like alignment. Decisions become cleaner. Boundaries become clearer. And clarity confuses harm more than confrontation ever could. What ultimately remains is this understanding: plans built on cruelty are loud because they are unstable. They demand constant force to exist. Plans built on care, however, sustain themselves quietly. They don't need threats. They need participation, so the real collapse is not just of a single malicious idea, but of the belief that harm is inevitable. It isn't. It persists only where attention is absent and connection is broken. Restore either one, and the structure weakens. As this awareness spreads, it creates a ripple effect. One person influences another. One conversation reshapes a habit. One act of care reinforces a culture. And cultures, once shifted, are incredibly hard to exploit. This is how safety scales. Not through control, but through consciousness. Not through fear, but through trust. Not through isolation, but through shared responsibility. By the time you reach this point, something subtle has already changed. The threat feels smaller. Your sense of agency feels larger. That is not coincidence. That is what happens when truth replaces illusion, and once that replacement occurs, there is no going back. In the end, what remains is not fear, but clarity. Clarity about how fragile harm really is, and how resilient awareness can be. The most dangerous lies lose their power when people understand that they are not isolated pieces on a board, but connected parts of a living network. Nothing built against life can outlast life itself. There is a calm that comes with this understanding. Not the calm of denial, but the calm of preparedness. The kind that doesn't rush, doesn't panic, doesn't freeze. It observes. It chooses. It acts when needed and steps back when wisdom says wait. This calm is not accidental, it is cultivated through attention and care. You begin to see that protection is not heroic in appearance. It is ordinary. It looks like checking in. Like trusting your instincts. Like choosing people over convenience. Like refusing to ignore discomfort just to keep the peace. These quiet acts do not make headlines, but they prevent tragedies before they are ever named. Another realization settles in: darkness depends on exhaustion. It waits for people to be too tired to care, too distracted to notice, too overwhelmed to respond. Rest, therefore, becomes resistance. Community becomes renewal. Looking after one another is not just kindness, it is strategy. There is no final villain defeated in a single moment. There is no dramatic victory speech. Instead, there is continuity. Life goes on safely. People return home. Conversations continue. Futures remain intact. And that is the greatest success of all: nothing terrible to explain because nothing terrible was allowed to happen. This is where empowerment quietly takes root. Not in grand declarations, but in daily confidence. Confidence that your awareness matters. Confidence that speaking up is worth it. Confidence that help exists, and that you can be part of it for someone else. The illusion that harm is clever or unstoppable fades completely here. What once seemed intimidating now looks clumsy, desperate, temporary. It needed darkness to survive, and darkness is hard to maintain in a world where people are awake. So this is the final truth: the collapse does not happen because someone is smarter or stronger. It happens because someone is present. Because someone cares. Because someone chooses connection over silence and courage over fear. And once enough people make that choice, even quietly, even imperfectly, the outcome is no longer in doubt. Plans rooted in harm do not stand a chance. Not today, not tomorrow, not in a world where awareness has already begun to spread.